Hi, it's Emily again. I'm here to share with you something I'm super excited about. I did a random vintage used bookstore shopping spree yesterday. I usually only do my book hauls on the last day of the month for the upcoming month or the first day of the month. And so this is one of the books I purchased, and I'm going to show you what I purchased. Everything in there was used. Over 3/4 of it was vintage. Some of it was used, more modern. If you're familiar with the picture book, the children's picture storybook Eloise, which has sort of a pink cover, I found this, one of Kay Thompson's other Eloise books, Eloise in Moscow, and I loved it because the cover in the back is kind of done like newspaper articles, and inside it's all done, it's sort of, the style of it reminds me a lot like the Madeline books, and it's Eloise in Moscow, and I think the whole book is done like it's being reported, like she's being reported in a newspaper. So the artwork, though, by Kay Thompson is absolutely stunning. And the original Eloise book was done in the 1950s. And this one, I didn't actually look at the date, but I love the book. And it's not, they're longer books and with a lot of shorter chunks of text. So certainly you can read this to a young child, but I purchased them. Anytime I do get a picture book, it's because it's vintage, or because it's famous, or because I love the artwork. And it's always good to have a few of those on hand when I do reading for the SMART program for kids, or when I have visitors, or for my children's literature project. And since we're on the topic of children's picture books, I did purchase, this is kind of exciting, this is Walt Disney's Bambi, this absolute old picture book of Bambi. I thought was full of absolutely beautiful pictures, and it was, of course, Bambi was 1941. This one was done in 2001, but I love Bambi, and I'm a huge Disney fan, and I love sort of how this book was laid out, and I thought the pictures were beautiful, and it was only $2. That's the fun about going to vintage or used bookstores, is you can just find things you wouldn't want to normally spend much money on just to have on your shelf. So I thought this was really, really, really pretty, and it kind of brought back that sort of Disney nostalgia, which I really love. And I purchased, speaking about Disney, you might remember the Annette TV series, and this is Walt Disney's sort of like a mystery one of those from the 50s, these sort of 50s and 60s, the Walt Disney's Annette and the Mystery at Smuggler's Cove. And they have these sort of little mysteries that appeal to teenage girls. Let's see if this has a date. Whitman Publishing, 1963. Okay, so 1963. So I thought this would be a fun quick little read, just to see kind of what teenage girls were, or young girls were reading back then. And I haven't read any of those Annette books. And I have another similar one I picked up randomly. I never heard of it. It's from the Meg series. This is Meg, The Secret of the Witch's Stairway, written by Holly Beth Walker, another vintage book. There was a whole Meg series, and these were all just little mysteries too. Obviously very popular for girls. Sort of, I think these were all takeoffs from when Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys became famous. This one has no date, but I can tell by the pages and the style and the publisher that it was early 60s, late 50s. So this will be a fun little one-day read. I just love purchasing older vintage children's books or little novels to see what they were reading back then, and just to kind of compare it to the modern. So speaking of vintage, absolutely excited about this, the Raggedy Andy stories. And I've done an entire video on Raggedy Ann, Johnny Grell's books. Don't let it fool you. It is not a book to read to toddlers. Actually, Johnny Grell's books have quite a lot of text on them, and they are pretty fat. Today's child would not have the attention span to sit through this unless they were maybe over 8 years old and really liked to be read to. But Johnny Grell is also an illustrator, and when his daughter passed away at the age of, I believe, 13, 14 from a vaccination, he had, when she was ill before she died, he had been telling her all these stories he made up about an old rag doll that belonged to his mother. That's where Raggedy Ann came from, and I have a few other vintage Raggedy Ann books. I do not have any of the Raggedy Andy books, so I am purchasing this. And I have to say that Johnny Grell's art skills were absolutely phenomenal. And this one actually isn't as bright and colorful as some of the others. His Friendly Fairies book, the original Raggedy Ann book, Raggedy Ann and Andy's Magical Wishes all have absolutely brilliant, stunning art. This one has this is an older, very old book, and has a lot of the sort of faded more plates. But I love, the books are just so much fun. They read very well. They're clean, so you can read it to anybody who has the attention span and loves the sort of dolls and animals coming to life. But what makes it special is if you know a little bit about Johnny Grill's past and the tragedy of his daughter's death that is put into the books. That's what makes it so special, I think, for wanting to read. And I purchased the first book in the Ivy and Bean series because I've heard so much about it. It's an award-winning series. I don't know anything about it. There are 4 or 5 of the books. It's just a super short little read with some pencil drawings in it about, I guess, 2 girlfriends. I don't really know anything about it, but again, this is used, and it was only $3. And got my glasses. I'm not going to be able to read. I had 2006. 2006 is when the first Ivy and Bean book came out. So I'll look forward to reading that, and if you know anything about it, definitely share with me. So I would love to hear what you think. I have also read only one that I picked up in Utah of the American Girl books. And as you know, American Girl became this doll and toy and paper product and craft sort of line, but the original books were written a long time ago, and if you can find some sort of vintage copies of some of the originals, not all the spin-offs, they're they're so neat to read. I actually found 3 vintage Meet books. We have Meet Felicity, Meet Samantha, and Meet Kristen. So we have the Pioneer Girl, we have a Colonial Girl, and we have, this looks like a 1910 era, late Victorian, and these were done in early 1980s, 1986. Originally written in 1946. Felicity was written in, I saw one that was far older than that. One of them was 1930, I thought. Yeah, 1937. So Meet Kristen. So they're really short books, but what I love is how it really gives a really nice illustrated and text portrayal of life for a young girl at that time, whenever the time is of the girl that's being written about. And the writing is really good. It really is good. It's not too basic or boring. I actually was interested in reading them. Sometimes book that seems so easy, you lose my attention span, but these definitely didn't. Of course, you can read it in 30 minutes or 20 minutes. Maybe a little longer, actually. These look longer than that. But I really like the American Girl books, and I would try to get any of the Meet books. Meet, and then whatever the girl's name. There's like 15 or 20 of them. Those are the best. All the spin-offs, like Kristen Gets in Trouble, Kristen Does This. Those ones are a little bit slow and not as original. I would definitely recommend the originals when the girls are introduced and introduced to the time period. Speaking of time periods and girls, everybody knows I love the Betsy Tacy books by Maud Hart Lovelace. I've done several videos about them. And I've only read the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And I just found at this used bookstore, Betsy and the Great Big World. This is the fattest of all of them. And I think it's because she is now graduating her school, getting out into the world for the first time, leaving her small Midwest town. So I'm very thrilled about reading this. And I think this is the last book. And I also found the first book in a different format, Maud Hart Lovelace, Betsy Tacy. This was before Tib came along. Betsy Tacy and Tib were in most of the books. I think the first one, it's just the 2 of them. And what I love about the Betsy Tacy books is also all of them have these really charming little drawings. And if you like Anne of Green Gables, Ellen Montgomery, Maud Hart Lovelace's writing style is very similar. These Betsy Tacy books are wonderful coming-of-age stories. They're very charming. They're beautifully written and not boring in any way. I love them. I just absolutely love them. And in the back, they all have a nonfiction section where they have sort of maps of a lot of the characters and locations in the books were based on Maud Hart Lovelace's childhood when she was growing up. And there's always pictures of the buildings where some of these settings took place, pictures of the real people that her characters were based on. Here's a picture of her. So this is 1906. The Betsy Tacy books were written in the 1940s. So Betsy Tacy, another series, absolutely beautiful, clean, wonderful. Let your girls read it. They will love it. This is funny. I have never read a Beverly Cleary book, and I'm a little behind in that regard. The first Beverly Cleary book I have purchased used, for obvious reasons, Emily's Runaway Imagination, and my name is Emily, so I couldn't help it. And even more than that, Emily lives in an old farmhouse in Pitchfork, Oregon, and I live in Oregon. So I thought this was just meant to be for me to pick up. I was looking for a Beverly Cleary book, and I saw this. Can imaginative Emily make her biggest dream come true? Again, that was kind of symbolic because I'm a big sort of supporter of the whole law of attraction and visualization for goal creation, and so I thought this was really neat, and it has some neat pictures in it. So I'm really excited to read that, to see if I can translate any important meaning in there. 2 books left. This one, I had no idea what it is, but I absolutely loved it. It was Miranda at the Movies, and kind of early 1900s, and it kind of looks like a textbook, but it had these really neat calligraphy. It has really neat drawings. It's some kind of a novel about a young girl that gets into the movies not long after the first car comes out, and her journey into the city of New York. And I just love the layout of it, and I love the way that the book looks, and I really liked, again, the art in it. So it's written by Jane Kendall, and this book, and I've never heard of it. I don't know anything about it, and that's sometimes what is the most fun about buying old books. It was actually written in 1989, so I guess we'll see. It could be a total bomb or absolutely delightful. And lastly, my vintage children's book, picture book, copy of Babars and His Children. This is a 1960s original copy of a first printing, and it actually was not inexpensive. And Babars is very, very well known in schools and literacy, and is a children's literature character. And so for my master's thesis project on children's literature, I actually wanted to purchase this to include. So, and they did have some of the more modern and more, in the last few years, the copies of the Babars books that you could purchase there as well that were used. But, and like Babars and His Children, they had one from 2007, and I thought it was much shinier and prettier, and even the inside. But I like the art in the children's books to be as the illustrator and author intended it, because it's closer to what life was like at the time. That's what makes vintage books so neat, is the art, the writing, the style, the typography. It is all representative of the culture and the society and the historical development of children's literature. And if you're studying the historical development of children's literature, you want to see books as they existed during the time that they existed. And so I've never read a Babars book. Well, maybe I did when I was a child. I have no recollection. So this will be very interesting to study, and it is a nice little antique. So that was my vintage and used book haul, randomly out of the blue. Believe it or not, all those books barely was still under $50. So if you can find a local bookstore, used books, vintage books, go there, go to the children's section. It is so fun to just look and see what they have that's old, to see things that you've never heard of, don't know about, that appeals to you. If you see a book that has a beautiful cover, that has illustrations inside, or you like the feel of it in your hand, or there's something about it that just makes you want to keep looking through it or pick it up, that usually is something that you should explore, and possibly something you should buy, because we shouldn't buy just books that we have heard about or know about. We should explore and find new things and then tell everybody about it. So that's what I'm here to do for you. Thanks for watching.